talking about this, though. Does sex get better with age? 0207 862 2222. That is the number. Do give us a ring. Did you just become more confident in the boudoir as you got older? You knew what you wanted. You weren't shy to say so. Or maybe you've lost all interest in sex and would much rather have a nice piece of Victoria sponge instead. Perhaps you'd like some tips to get out of a dry spell. Maybe you have any advice for us, then do share it. Suzanne, so you had loved sex in your 40s. You had a bit of a sort of dip in your libido where you were much less into it. And in your 60s, you thought, mate, this is my moment. Is that what happened?
Yeah, basically, I met somebody in my early 60s and we were just having a really good time together. And he was surprised at how he kind of perked up when he met somebody who was equally as enthusiastic as I was about sex.
I believe that perked up is the technical term, Helen. Perking up is excellent.
Perking and enthusiasm. Can I just ask what enthusiasm means? Like frequency of the action, or?
I think enthusiasm for sex just means that we have an appetite for it, we enjoy it, we express to others how much we enjoy it.
Well, that might be a bit annoying if you're talking to people and they're not doing it, and then you're saying how you're, doing it.
What do you think it was, though? Because you say that you'd had this period between your late 40s and your 60s where you'd sort of gone off the sexual boil a bit. Yeah. Was it just that you fancied this particular guy so much and it sort of sparked up all your interest again? Was that the thing?
Yeah, I think we both fancied each other. That was a large part of it. Mm-hmm. He hadn't had that much sex for a while. So when he met somebody who enjoyed it, his interest in it was re-engaged and reignited. And also, he was just curious to try out fun things, like, for instance, role-playing and dressing up in outfits. And
what did you dress up as?
Exactly.
We're desperate to know.
We need to know what
I think
costumes.
My favourite one was the nurse.
I knew you were going to say that. I thought you'd be like a feudal lord or
I feel so sorry
a magician.
for real nurses. I really do.
Everyone
apologise
does
to you.
nurse.
Everybody
I thought you were
does
going to say
nurses.
police officer and you had to arrest him and put handcuffs on him or something.
Something Elizabethan, or maybe with armour or something.
Is the situation that this was a new man? And if it's your old husband that you've been with for years, or your old partner that you've been with for years, and suddenly they say dress up as a nurse, you're like, oh, do me a favour, I've got to do the ironing, I've got to do
And what was he dressed up as, a surgeon? I mean, was it two-way?
The patient. He was probably the patient.
Yes.
No, he was a patient. At the time, he actually was a little bit ill, so I did volunteer to dress up as a nurse because I thought it would be fun. But I just think dressing up in general, not necessarily in costume, but...
Do you come out, do you sort of say, excuse me, knock, knock, and you're on the landing, and then you come in and you go, da-da? Or, I mean, there has to be some element of surprise, or do you just have them in the duvet and then you, excuse me, I'll just put my new pyjamas on or something?
A guy I know said to me the other day, I didn't know that I was going to be seeing you and discussing role play, but he said to me, I can't stand role play. I said, we were just driving to the restaurant at this point, and I said, really, why not? And he said, because I know you're not really a nurse. So what am I pretending I think you're a nurse? I know you perfectly well.
So he's missed the point.
Or an air hostess or whatever it is.
He's being too literal. He's not a
He
player.
didn't like it. So it's not for
Suzanne is
everyone.
a player.
I think he's missed the point, don't
you embrace playfulness.
Okay, let's talk about what happens, though,
Absolutely.
if you're in a long-term relationship and it has gone off the boil. How do you spark up some kind of sexual interest, especially if you're a bit shy talking about it, because you never really talked about it in the first place?
You're not shy, are you?
No, I'm not shy, but I do admit, and it happened in my own marriage, actually, that we met when we were really young, in our 20s. We didn't really talk about sex. It wasn't something that we discussed. It just was something that we did. And then when it started to get a bit monotonous, as it often does, I didn't have the language at that point to know how to deal with that. I didn't feel comfortable.
So did you leave him? Was that the solution?
Yeah, well, I did ultimately. Ultimately, we did end up getting divorced. But
let's say there are people watching. And they're thinking, well, that is me. It's not that I don't like my partner. It's not I don't respect my partner. It's just, the sex got a bit samey and then it sort of happened a bit less frequently and then I can't actually remember the last time it happened. it's a bit awkward to suddenly start talking about it, isn't it?
100%.
what do you
And I think
do?
that,
How would
you know,
you-
one of the techniques that I think is great is something called the yes, no, maybe checklist. It literally is, you can print it off the internet.
Right.
Okay.
And it literally is a checklist of activities. It could be quite, you know, basic activities.
Housework?
Right through to stuff that's quite kinky, right? And it literally is, yes, I would quite like to try this. No, I would never like to try this. I'm thinking maybe
Open to it.
I'm open to it. And then there's a giving or receiving column as
Okay,
well.
what's the sentence that you utter before this? So, you know, you're just coming in with the lamb chops. And you're like, hello, here's your dinner. And look, and here's
And
the
now
thing
the
about
checklist.
whether you'd like to paint chocolate sauce all over my inner thigh. Yes, no, or maybe. And your other half is like, what the heck?
And
I mean,
it's-
how do you stop them feeling ambushed and, you know, putting...
And I think not asserting blame on somebody else and making them feel inadequate is so important. And part of that starts actually in the bedroom if you do still have sex, in saying, I really enjoy when you do that. I sometimes think maybe it would be nice if you did do that.
It's like dealing with an animal like a pet, like that wonderful man who organises dogs and cats to behave in a different way. So it's like behaviour modification. So you praise. Do you think the person might feel a bit patronised
Yes,
if
they
suddenly
might.
out of the blue you go, you are very good when you brush my hair in that lovely way, and here's the checklist.
You know, I've never met a man who didn't like being praised. Have you?
No, you're right.
Absolutely true.
I have
And I like the way
never met
Helen's
one.
doing this technique of questioning, but not saying anything about this herself at all. I know that you're in a long and happy marriage. I've had the pleasure of meeting your delightful husband.
Yes.
So is there anything you wish to contribute about?
Well, no, I'm sitting here. I mean, I'm soaking up Suzanne's expertise, your gung-ho attitude.
But if you were to charge home this evening and
With the
say-
checklist?
Yes. How do you think that would be received?
Chris, I really like particularly the way you look at me when we've got our takeaway and then build from there.
Yes, and do you think he would respond to that? Would he be delighted
He'd be
or would he be
slightly
horrified?
alarmed, I think, because it would be unusual language. So I suppose one has to go out of one's comfort zone, but the other person will know that you are doing it. So how can you be spontaneous and get to that nirvana of connection?
Right, let's talk to our caller now. Philip is on the line in Kent. Philip is 81 years old. Philip, how lovely to speak to you again. How are you?
Oh, hello there, Vanessa. Very nice to see you, and I welcome you on your new show.
Oh, well, that's very charming of you, but you are a charming man. And I know this because I'll never forget the conversation we had when I was sitting in for Jeremy. And that was when you
dear.
were, at 81 years old, telling me about your sex life. So would you be so kind as to tell us what's going on?
Well, I thought I didn't qualify because you're only talking about 60s.
No, you definitely qualify. You 100%. You are our absolute aspirational idol in this conversation. You're 81. Tell me about, I mean, I wouldn't normally say this, but I know you're happy talking about it, your sex life.
Yes, well, we are very happy. We at least twice a week. And the thing is, when you're in your 80s, you've got to keep fit.
Yeah.
You've got to stay thin to win. And once a lot of people, they get oversized and they lose their energy.
Absolutely.
If you keep fit, you're on top of it all the time. And let your mind wander. You have to fantasize as well. If you do repetition, you're going to get stale. So you must do different things. We covered a lot. I give her a massage at least sometimes half an hour.
Lovely.
And it's lovely. You
is
can
lovely.
relax and
Yeah.
yes, and everyone's fine then. And as I say, when you get older, as you say, you are your soulmate, but also your brother and sister. You do things. You look after each other's back. You get more friendly. You get more lovingly. Before, when you're younger, it's lust. But when you get older, it's kindness. And you've got a partner there that you rely on, you can respect, and you problems. I mean, everyone in marriage gets problems. So you discuss each problems. It's a different ball game. It's nicer. When you get to our age, Vanessa, you will go through this and you would love it, honestly.
Well,
But you've got
I'm always,
Sorry.
when I speak to you, Philip, it gives me genuine joy because I just love the way you're kind, respectful, tender, but also imaginative. So you're massaging, you're
For
doing...
half an hour, he's massaging.
Half an hour, he's 81.
I mean-
and also that he says it mustn't be samey because otherwise it gets boring.
Well, no, there's a lot. There's a lot to that. I mean, that's a busy life.
A lot going on. Philip, what a pleasure to talk to you again. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Safina's on the line in Bradford. Safina, you're telling what to you is absolutely the truth. Sex changes after you have kids. So what's gone on with you, my love?
Absolutely. I got married quite young. I got married at 17.
Yeah.
And my family, my parents fixed me up with this lovely man. In Pakistan, and we went on holiday, and we kind of hit it all off, and it was all brilliant. We got married, and I came back to the UK, you know. Then he came to stay with me here, and then it just all changed when we had kids. We've got two, and it just got boring after a while. And I agree with Philip. Sometimes I think you've got to spice it up a little bit, you know, stuff like that.
So have you done that?
No, we are no longer together. We're separated the last 2 years, so it's kind of like, I don't know, like it didn't happen, and it didn't work out.
Let's see if we've got any suggestions here from Suzanne.
From an expert.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, sex is difficult after you've had kids. Making the time for it is difficult. I know some people argue with me about this, but I do think there is some benefit to diarising your sex life when everything is so busy in your life that you can't make time for it, and you expect this sort of spontaneity that you were talking about. My personal situation is I do diarise it on the weekends, and I look forward to that. And I think creating space in your life for sex is so important, and expecting people to be spontaneous is not realistic when you've got so many demands on your life day to day.
But that does
looking
feel,
after kids.
I think that's great and that's very comforting, but then there's also a sense of duty.
Yeah.
How do you kind of avoid in the Filofax, I'm that old, I have a Filofax, 3 o'clock on a Sunday, I think that's your preferred time, is it?
It is, actually.
I was talking to her in the makeup room. And then, so how do you,
How do you avoid feeling that it's a burden?
Exactly.
Well, I think we only have to look at Philip, I'm afraid, for the answer to
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Because what
Half an hour
Philip does
massage.
is he makes it playful. And he makes it something fun. And it's really clear from listening to the way he talks about his partner that there's an element of creativity and fun and playfulness about it, which actually makes it feel something really quite
Getting worried.
exciting.
Let me just give her one of these. You fan yourself with one of those. With pleasure.
I'm feeling myself
With pleasure.
under pressure to be
just trying to
playful.
calm down. This says, sex gets better not just with age, but when you're totally comfortable and trust your partner and have intimacy with them over many years, which is either true or not true. Sometimes it just gets familiar, boring, repetitive, and like a real chore. But obviously, sometimes it gets nicer and nicer and more inviting. Dominic says, when you get to 60, sex is a chore. It's a good idea, but it's not worth it. It's easier to walk the dog. I mean,
two different behaviours.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Rachel says, I find as my husband and I age, we have less sex, but it's just as good. And Brian says, what's sex? Is that another Gen Z kind of a thing, he says?
Well, there are modern ways. The modern generation do lots of different behaviours now,
Absolutely.
don't they? There's words for what young
Polyamory,
people do.
All I know
ethical
is this.
non-monogamy.
Yes.
In the olden days, whenever that was, people often had more sex on holiday. And the reason I think that they had more sex on holiday was that the ladies in particular would read like a Jackie Collins book or some kind of, one of those...
Escapism.
Sexy, or a Jilly Cooper book, like Rivals, and they'd be reading a book on the plane, and suddenly they're in holiday mood. They're reading a bit about sex. It's a bit sort of saucy.
In the brain.
And then suddenly something would sort of ignite a little bit.
And the sunshine as well.
And the
combination of
sunshine.
sun, vitamin D,
exactly.
and a book.
And I for years and years I didn't have a smartphone when everyone else had one. Videos stopped being available. I never saw any porn at all. When I did get a smartphone, I immediately had a look. I was absolutely horrified. I like the story where they come to mend the carburettor, which has broken broken down. You don't get a story anymore at all. So and also I now would have to put my glasses on to look at the film. I just can't really be doing with any of that. But a book that gets you in
It's
the
all
mood.
about the brain. The brain's a muscle. So we're talking about fantasizing.
Absolutely.
Don't you think? And to sort of get yourself into a sort of sexual climate where you are thinking about it.
Go on a sunbed first, right?
Yeah.
Maybe if you're not on holiday. Just be practical. We need tips.
Yeah.
We're full of tips here.
And I think part of the reason why when you're on holiday you want to have more sex, other than reading Rivals, which I agree is very sexy, is we're relaxed, we're feeling comfortable.
Leisure
we have the
wear,
sun,
leisure outfit.
We're wearing less
Couple of
clothes.
drinks.
I mean, I notice just in general that as soon as the spring comes, everybody on the street is smiling
That's
and
your
just
sap
looking.
is rising. It's literally rising.
Literally rising.
Absolutely. Well, this has been, I don't know whether this has put anyone in the mood or absolutely put everyone off forever. If it's done the latter, I'm very sorry indeed. Thank you so much for your calls on this.